Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
I was tired, so incredibly tired of hearing the same so-called compliments from my own mother. You deserve more, Ilara. You're brilliant, you're beautiful, you deserve more. And then the inevitable follow-up. The little twist of the knife disguised as concern. Silas is nice, but something's missing. One day, you'll see you could have gone further. Outwardly, I would smile. A tight, practiced smile that didn't reach my eyes. I would nod and pretend to be patient, letting her words wash over me like a tide I'd learned to endure. But inside, it ate at me, bit by bit, a slow-acting poison I willingly drank every Sunday over brunch. My life with Silas wasn't a grand fireworks display. It was the quiet, steady warmth of a hearth. It was the smell of coffee he brewed for me every morning, exactly how I liked it. It was the way his hand found mine in the dark of a movie theater, his thumb rubbing gentle circles over my knuckles. It was simple, it was calm, it was real, and my mother, Lorraine, hated it. So, when she showed up at our door one Tuesday afternoon, her eyes sparkling with an excitement that felt both foreign and dangerous, I was immediately suspicious. She proposed a trip, a week in the Hamptons, all expenses paid. I stared at her. The Hamptons? Mom, where did this come from? And more importantly, where did the money for all of this come from? She waved a dismissive, perfectly manicured hand. I closed a great sale this week, darling. A huge real estate deal. I just want to celebrate with my daughter. Is that so strange? She gave me a cryptic smile, one that held 1,000 unspoken intentions. The excuse felt too convenient, too neat. But maybe I was just tired of fighting, tired of trying to keep everything balanced: my love for Silas, my duty to my mother, my own flickering sense of self. Maybe, a quiet, treacherous part of me whispered, I wanted to feel special again. When I told Silas, he didn't show a flicker of suspicion. He just wrapped his arms around me, his chin resting on the top of my head. His embrace was my anchor, the one solid thing in my world. You should go, he said, his voice a low rumble against my hair. You deserve time with your mom. Have fun. He kissed my forehead goodbye at the door, a lingering, tender press of his lips. I'll count the days until you're back, he promised. And I believed him. I really did. The first day was a blur of opulence. The ocean air, thick with salt and money. The boutique shops with price tags that made my head spin. My mother was in her element, gliding through the world she believed was her birthright, and by extension, mine. I felt like an actress in a play I hadn't rehearsed for. On the second evening, Lorraine suggested dinner at a chic, waterfront restaurant. Just something relaxed, she said, adjusting the silk scarf at her neck. Perfect for catching up. No rush, no obligations. I agreed without a second thought. I put on a light summer dress, tied my hair up, and went downstairs with a small, genuine smile on my face. For a moment, I let myself believe this was just a mother-daughter trip, a chance to reconnect. The illusion shattered the moment I saw our table. There were 3 chairs, and sitting in one of them, already sipping a glass of wine as if he owned the entire coastline, was Sterling Mallister. I recognized him instantly, not from magazines, though he was certainly in them. I recognized him from the constant, casual name-dropping my mother had perfected over the years. Sterling Mallister just bought the old Vanderbilt estate. Sterling Mallister is taking his yacht to Monaco. Sterling Mallister, her ideal match for me, a dream she had nurtured since we were teenagers. He stood to greet me, his movements fluid, his confidence radiating from him like a physical force. He felt, already, like a part of the story. My story. Ilara, my mother said, her voice a symphony of feigned surprise. Look who we bumped into at the hotel. Sterling was just saying how he was dining alone, and I thought, well, the more the merrier. But I saw it. I saw it all in a flash of blinding clarity. The whole thing, the great sale, the sudden trip, this relaxed dinner, it had all been a setup, a carefully constructed stage, and I was the last actor to be handed the script. I forced a smile as I sat down, but inside, my mind was racing, connecting the dots. The flimsy excuse my mother had given me now sounded absurd. One look at Sterling, so comfortable, so completely invested in this charade, was all it took for the silent conclusion to click into place. He had paid for the trip. That explained everything. Dinner dragged on longer than it should have. Sterling was a master conversationalist. He told stories with perfect timing, knowing when to pause for effect, when to lean in, when to flatter. He made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. And my mother, she was the conductor of this orchestra. She fueled every exchange, finishing his sentences, laughing just before the punchline, nudging me with discreet glances and comments that mixed charm with judgment. I tried to keep my guard up. I thought of Silas, his quiet laugh, the way he'd look at me across the dinner table in our small kitchen, a look that said everything without saying a word. But I felt my defenses slipping. There was something dangerous in the air, a potent blend of praise, desire, and validation that I hadn't felt in ages. Sterling was handsome, confident, and seemed to know exactly what to say to unravel me. Just before dessert, my mother excused herself, claiming she was suddenly exhausted. It was so transparent, so blatantly manipulative, that I almost laughed. In that instant, I realized I was alone with Sterling because my mother wanted it that way. This was the final act of her play. He ordered another glass of wine for me, his eyes never leaving my face. "You deserve more admiration, you know," he said, his voice low and intimate. "How can someone like you stand such an ordinary life?" His voice was calm, but his words were sharp. They were my mother's words, polished and delivered with a devastating charm. I tried to change the subject, to talk about the weather, the food, anything, but it was too late. Something inside me, a part of me that had been starved for this kind of attention, wavered. When he leaned closer, the scent of expensive cologne and wine filling the space between us, I didn't pull back. When he placed his hand over mine on the table, his touch sending a jolt through my system, I didn't move it. When he kissed me, his lips confident and sure, I closed my eyes. And when I woke up the next morning, tangled in the high thread count sheets of his hotel suite, guilt hadn't woken up yet. There was only a hazy, disoriented sense of disbelief. I slipped out before he stirred, before breakfast could be offered. I walked the silent, carpeted hallway back to the room I shared with my mother. I entered quietly. She was already awake, sitting on the balcony, a cup of coffee in her hands, looking out at the ocean as if she knew, as if she had known exactly what would happen. She didn't turn around. She only asked, her voice calm and victorious, "Sleep well?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yes," I whispered to the empty room. Then I went straight to the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the cold edge of the marble tub and stared at the floor for a long, long time. And that's when the images of Silas surfaced. The way he held my hand when we walked down the street. The simple, rambling chats on our worn-out couch. The care he took in daily, ordinary details. The life I had. All of it felt distant now, like a scene from someone else's movie. There had been no fight, no argument, no crisis. Just a void. A void I had just created myself. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that an old colleague of Silas's was staying on the very same floor for a business conference. He had seen me step into the elevator with Sterling the night before. He'd watched the lingering hug in the lobby, the quick, stolen kiss in the hallway. He knew it was wrong to meddle, but he also knew Silas. He knew what that picture would do. He took one photo with his phone. No zoom, no flash, just enough to capture the moment. He sent it to Silas with a short, brutal text. "Sorry to send this, man, but I thought you should know." While I sat on the edge of that tub, trying to figure out how to piece my reality back together, Silas's phone buzzed in another time zone. He saw the image. He read the message. And he said nothing. He recognized Sterling immediately. Of course he did. He was the mother-in-law's favorite. The name that popped up in veiled jokes and not so subtle comparison. The real man who knows how to treat a woman. Lorraine had never hidden her preference. Even while smiling, she made it clear she thought Silas was too small for her daughter's world. He got up from his desk. He poured a cup of coffee. He sat at our kitchen table, and stared at the silence. There was nothing to confront. "No," he said, she said. The truth was right there, pixelated and damning, with no room for doubt. Long ago, Silas had decided he would never beg anyone to stay. He'd been man enough to love with everything he had. Now, he'd be man enough to let go. I still had a few days left on the trip. A few more days of playing my part, of smiling through lunches and dinners. The guilt now a heavy, indigestible lump in my stomach. When I got back, I wouldn't find packed bags or angry arguments. I would find absence. His absence, the absence of the future I threw away in a single night, wrapped in smiles and praise that were never really mine. The flight home was heavy with a silence thicker than clouds. Beside me, my mother wore a look of quiet triumph. She was convinced she'd done the right thing, certain her carefully laid plan was working perfectly. In her mind, her daughter only needed to follow the path she had so graciously drawn. During that dinner with Sterling, without me even noticing, she had snapped a few discreet photos on her phone, close angles, shared smiles, an intimacy that spoke for itself. She kept them like silent trophies, planning to use them to show Silas if he put up a fight. For her, the divorce was just a practical step, a necessary formality to turn Ilara into Mrs. Sterling Mallister. She could already picture it, telling her friends with a sigh of pride that at last, her daughter had made the right choice. When I walked into the house, everything looked the same. The smell of old books and Silas's cedarwood soap, the pictures on the walls, the worn blanket folded over the arm of the sofa. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. The air was still, too still. On the kitchen table, stark against the dark wood, sat a white envelope. On top of it, catching the afternoon light, was Silas's wedding ring. No note, no letter, just the ring. My chest tightened, a cold knot of guilt and disbelief. I picked it up. It felt cold, a dead weight in my hand. My fingers trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were the divorce papers, already filled out, already signed. I ran through the house, my voice hoarse, calling his name. Silas. Silas. As if I might still find him in the bedroom, or on the porch, waiting for an explanation. But no one was there. Andrew was gone. He had left only the end. I called his phone repeatedly. The first few calls were declined. Then, everything went straight to voicemail. I sent frantic texts, short ones at first, not knowing what to say, then long, rambling messages, trying to justify what I couldn't even explain to myself. In one, I wrote, I lost myself for a moment. I hated myself for it. A moment. As if it had been a quick stumble, a momentary lapse, when I knew, deep down, it had been a choice that was pushed on me, yes. But ultimately, it was mine. Days later, when my mother heard that Silas had filed for divorce, she almost let a smile slip. She covered it with a rehearsed line about how sorry she was, but she couldn't hide her relief. For her, that was the official green light. Sterling was now a free road, without a plain, ordinary husband blocking the story. The process was swift, uncontested. Silas didn't want anything, not the house, not the furniture, nothing. He just wanted distance. My mother was quick to fill the void. This is the time to truly start over, Ilara, she'd say, her voice bright. With someone on your level, like I've always said. Confused and fragile, I let myself be swept along again. I accepted Sterling's dinner invitation, not really knowing how I felt. I accepted the compliments, the expensive gifts, my mother's constant, approving looks. Before I even realized it, we were a couple. My face started showing up in society columns, on the arm of the heir to one of the state's most influential families. The image was perfect. The newly single woman, rising from the ashes of a simple marriage with class, rebuilding her life alongside a rich, handsome, well-known man. It was everything Lorraine had ever wanted for me. Sterling made it all look so easy. He was great at selling ideas. He sold the promise of stability, of a life without worry, as if it were simple, and I went along with it, even though a hollow feeling inside me grew, week by week. I remembered Silas in the most ordinary gestures. The way he folded clothes, the corner of the bed he always slept on, the patient way he listened when my thoughts got tangled. With Sterling, everything felt like a performance. He made me laugh, but it was always a quick, superficial laugh. I got used to hiding the discomfort, to working hard to keep up appearances. After all, everyone said I looked better than ever. Everyone. Except me. A few weeks later, I started noticing a pattern. Sterling always dodged delicate topics. He never spoke in depth about the family business. Whenever a reporter approached us at events, he would whisper something in my ear and whisk me away before they could ask a real question. I told myself I was overreacting, that I was just looking for flaws. But the feeling that something was wrong, something was hidden beneath the polished surface, kept growing. Then, one random Tuesday morning, the news exploded online. The Mallister name was everywhere. Still in bed, I grabbed my phone, my heart racing. The first headline knocked the wind out of me. Sterling Mallister under investigation for tax fraud. I kept scrolling, my hands trembling. Money laundering. Offshore accounts. His father and brothers were involved. The entire family empire. All Mallister family assets frozen by court order. The police had raided their properties that morning. Sterling had been taken in for questioning. I sat up, shaking. I called his number. Out of service. I called my mother. Lorraine answered in a panic, her voice thin and reedy, the sound of the news playing loudly in the background. It has to be a mistake, she kept repeating, over and over. A misunderstanding. But the footage on the television told another story. The Mallister family being escorted into police vans. Luxury cars being towed away. The glass castle collapsing, piece by piece. In real time, I spent the day trying to grasp how everything had fallen apart so fast. The life of luxury evaporated like a bubble. The name that once opened doors now slammed them shut. And my image, once linked to success and aspirational romance, started showing up in articles as the girlfriend of the investigated heir. The pain of watching everything crumble was huge. But something hurt even more, realizing that my mother didn't seem sorry for the choices she'd forced on me. She didn't apologize for my broken heart or my ruined reputation. She just looked frustrated. Frustrated for betting on the wrong horse. Sterling had been the centerpiece of her grand design. With him in jail and his fortune frozen, all that remained was the bitter taste of an irreversible mistake. The triumphant look vanished from my mother's face, replaced by the crushing weight of the defeat she had built herself. And for the first time, I began to question everything I had swallowed in silence for all those years. The scandal was still fresh on the headlines when my mother showed up at Silas's house. No call, no text. She just appeared, as if the urgency of her own chaos justified barging into his peace. She rang the bell hard, once, then again. When he opened the door, her face was already wet with tears. She was openly crying, makeup smudged, hair pulled back any old way. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, hand on the doorknob, waiting. I need to talk to you, she choked out, pressing her hands to her chest as if holding in her own regret. He stepped aside just enough for her to walk in. She sank onto his couch, a new couch, in a new, unfamiliar apartment, and broke down completely. She told me about it later, recounting every painful detail. How she confessed that it was all her fault, that she had manipulated me from the start, that she'd rejected Silas for being too ordinary and had pushed Sterling on me instead. She confessed she'd always believed she had the right to decide my future, thinking she was protecting me, giving me a better destiny. But now she saw she'd done everything wrong. She told him about my empty stare these past days, how I barely spoke, how I walked around the house as if carrying 100 pounds on my back, and that it was all her fault. She was there, she told him, to ask for forgiveness, not out of convenience, but out of shame. She was sorry for every word, every hint, every time she had belittled him in front of me to make me believe he wasn't enough. Silas listened in silence. He told my mother that the pain was no longer raw. Now, it was a muted ache, a tender spot he'd learned to protect. Her words no longer cut him, but they offered no comfort, either. When she finished, sniffling and waiting for a reaction, he simply stood up. He walked to a shelf and took down a small, wooden box. Inside were photos of us, old notes, ticket stubs, memories from a time when he thought nothing could go wrong. He handed the box to her. There was no anger in his eyes, just a firm, quiet resolve. I kept this, he told her, his voice steady, thinking it might still matter someday. But I see now that it's just dead weight. You can have it. Maybe it will remind you that some things, once broken, can't be fixed. My mother tried to argue. She said people change, that he could give me a second chance. But Silas didn't hesitate. He told her he'd spent years trying to be accepted by her, trying to prove his worth to a family that never wanted him around. He'd swallowed hurtful remarks and judgmental looks, all for the love of me. But that love had been pushed off a cliff, and what remained now was a man at peace with his own choice to move on. I do forgive you, he said, his final words to her on the matter, but forgiveness isn't the same as returning. I've restarted my life, quietly, and I'm fine this way. My mother finally understood, truly understood, for the first time. She thanked him for listening and left with the box in her arm. She came home bearing a new burden. She told me she had failed twice, first by forcing our breakup, and then by trying to patch up what she had destroyed. This time, there was no plan, no Sterling, no luxury to undo the damage. I was lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling, when she walked in. She sat softly on the edge and told me everything, every detail of her conversation with Silas. She said he had moved on, her voice low, no drama, like someone admitting final defeat. I just closed my eyes. No tears fell. Only a long, shuddering sigh slipped out, as if I was finally accepting what I had truly lost. There was nothing left to hold on to. The castle was dust, and the only man who ever truly loved me was now just a memory in a box her mother had just set on the living room table. The following weeks were a deep dive into everything I had ignored for too long. The penthouse where Sterling had taken me to dinner no longer existed in my world. The imported car he used to pick me up was seized. His messages vanished. His number stopped working. When police knocked on our door asking about the gift Sterling had given me, reality hit with the force of a physical blow. Those watches, the designer handbags, even the blue stone necklace I had proudly worn to a charity event. All of it was tied to the investigation. I had to hand every single item back, as if I were returning the costume pieces of a character that had never been real. My image, once linked to elegance, became a joke in social circles. People who had rolled out the red carpet for me weeks earlier now traded mocking messages about me. I started avoiding going out. I ignored invites. I refused visitors. On the rare occasions I went to the market, I could feel their eyes on me. A mix of pity and judgment, as if everyone knew my story. She traded a real man for a fairy tale, and lost them both. I tried to distract myself with chores, but my mind always returned to the same spot. To Silas's silence. To the steadiness in his gaze as he handed over the memory box. Nothing was the same anymore. My mother, for the first time in her life, was quiet. She offered no advice, made no plans, suggested no outing. She curled up in her own guilt, spending her days tending a battered garden and shuffling through overdue bills. Both of her credit cards were canceled. The Mallister name she once glorified now meant debt, lawsuits, and public shame. Doors shut, one after another. Invites disappeared. Calls stopped coming. She was wiped from the city's elite, and with her, any trace of the status she thought she'd one day enjoy through me. With no way out, we packed our bags. We returned to the old house on the outskirts of New Jersey, the one where I grew up, the one my mother always said wasn't good enough. Now, with no other choice, we were sleeping in the same small rooms, surrounded by the same walls we had tried so desperately to leave behind. Walking through the front door, my mother tripped on a floor crack that had been there since the 90 seconds. She stopped, looked around the dusty, forgotten space, and muttered, "It's punishment." I said nothing. I went straight to my old room, closed the door, and lay down on the bed, fully dressed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the floral wallpaper on the ceiling for hours. The days that followed felt repetitive and gray. I scrubbed my social media clean. I deleted every photo with Sterling, every record of parties and trips. I kept only one picture, a photo of Silas and me from an ordinary weekend, laughing on our living room floor. That one hurt the most, because in that shot, there was no luxury, no status, only truth. I tried writing him a letter. I filled almost 2 pages with my regret, the blindness that had guided me, how much I missed him. When I finished, I read it over, and then I tore it all up. I knew he didn't need to hear anything else from me. He had already heard too much, had been patient beyond all reason. If he was at peace now, I had no right to drag him back into the mess I had made. I tucked the shredded pieces inside an old book and went silent again. A month later, I was aimlessly scrolling on my phone when a photo stopped me. It was Silas. He was smiling. A real, easy smile that reached his eyes. Next to him was a woman. Simple, elegant, with a kind expression. They were in a park, sitting on the grass, drinking coffee from thermos cups. Nothing flashy, nothing scandalous. Yet, it was enough to shatter the fragile balance I had tried to build, not out of jealousy, but because I saw that he had truly, completely moved on. There was no bitterness in his face, no resentment. He was free of the weight that I now forced myself to carry every single day. I closed the app, pushed the phone away, and stared at the ceiling once more. There was nothing to fix, only things to understand. And now, finally, I understood. Some choices collect interest over time. Some doors, when they close, aren't just locked, they're ripped off their hinges. And love, when it's dismissed, it turns into a lesson, a hard one, a final one, a lesson that repeats itself, in the silence, for the rest of your life. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.